we'll have our panel now. The final panel of the day. And yeah. So let me introduce you to our moderator. First of all, let's go through the main topic of the panel. It is creating or adapting payment schemes. This session will discuss the benefits and challenges of creating a local payment scheme or adapting international payment schemes to cater to the local market. And I would like to invite the moderator of the panel, Ahmet Duri, Head of IT at Tadavul Tech. Pleasure to have you. Please take a seat. And I'll announce our panelists. Muhammed Fikane, Director, Center of Expertise and Pre-Sales at S2M. Pleasure to have you. Please take a seat. Our other panelist is Ibrahim Gait, Personalization Center Manager at Tadavul Financial Group. A round of applause. Thank you. Melih Turan, CPO at Magellan. Is Melih here? Melih Turan. We'll start the panel with your questions, and when Melih arrives, Melih is here. Okay, excellent. Round of applause for Melih Turan, and now the panel is complete.
So hi everyone. So our main topic for the banner is creating or adopting payment scheme. So all of us today knows that a scheme is not a system. Scheme is a set of rules, standard, best practice that should be adhered by that country. So mainly today we need to discuss how we can implement a local scheme in specific countries and comparing it to the international schemes today, which is the global, such as Visa, MasterCard, JCB, and UnionPay. So the first question for Mr. Mohammed Fikan. Today, when we are talking about schemes, there should be a time and a way to implement a local scheme, and considering the other ecosystem or the other element from the issuers, acquirers, and processor. So please, from your experience of implementing such a project with S2M, so we need to know at what time a local scheme should be implemented on a specific countries, and why, since we have the international payment schemes such as Visa and MasterCard today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. So I'm Mohammed Fikan, and I have experience of 28 years in the payment. And for that question, I have implemented myself many payment schemes on the world. So just for information to respond to this question, because this question have a very big effect on the market and will have effect not only after years, but after decades on the market. So we have to be very, very careful to respond to this question about payment scheme. So payment scheme, who will be connected to this payment scheme? What environment, what we want for this payment scheme? How we want to grow with the payment scheme and the environment for the payment scheme? So we have to be very, very careful to answer to this question. Because just for information, payment scheme in the normally have to grow a country, payment in the country. But sometimes it will be obstacle to create this growing in the payment in some countries. And I'm going to answer that. So the first answer to answer for this question is what model we want for this payment scheme. Of course, there is technical question because central banks are always asking about technical questions. What is the ship? What is the terminals? And interoperability of payment between banks, fintechs, long-term finance companies, credit companies, and cooperative maybe. So this is not the good question. Question is more. Question is, what is the model for the payment we want? We have today many models. We have, for example, for the open countries and the majority of the countries in the world, we have the interchange model. So, for example, we have to answer who is going to pay for the transaction. Is it the final customer? Is it the merchant? How? How much? If we want to grow, what are the type of the transaction? And what are the services that we are going to offer for that country? These are the questions. But unfortunately, many central banks are thinking only for interoperability and technical questions. Yes, we have to think about this because today we have the terminals, we have EMVCO that pushing us to find out terminals, type of ships within this white label chips that we are discussing about, either CCD or CPA technology from EMVCO. But, I mean, we have also to think about how we want to grow with these payment schemes. Also, a regulator, we have just discussed before the panel. The regulator is very important, but the regulator he has to have first to answer to these questions in order to grow with this market, because a regulator unfortunately could have very, very bad effect on market. And in our region, we have already some answers. I mean, in our region, we have different answers. In our region, for example, in North Africa, the answer in Morocco is not the answer in Algeria. It's not the answer in Tunisia, just near country is totally different. But be careful when choosing a closed payment scheme. Yes, we are going to have interoperability of payment in that country, but maybe we will have some issues to integrate the latest technologies, the latest services. We will be late. We will have not a good model. So, for example, if we have open payment scheme, we can have very quickly integrate some technologies, some existing technology. For example, if we choose for closed payment scheme, what will be in this case the directory for payment e-commerce? What will be the authentication model for customers? What will be a token service provider for digitization? We know all the world, the trend, the world now is tokenization. So what will be in this case, who will be the token service provider? Do we need a digital vault to implement signatures and to implement security? What the model? So many questions, and we will have very careful. In my opinion, when we see all the world, especially Gulf area, they have understood what to do. Even just for information, for example, SAMA is, if you see in EMVCO list of countries that have a certification to be token service provider, SAMA, which is the network of Saudi Arabia, have the EMVCO certification. But because they have understand that they could do nothing with that, they have done opening, they have choose the opening payment scheme instead of closed payment scheme. Other thing, for example, if we see Iran, who is closed payment scheme. If you go, he goes to Iran, he could see, for example, and the model that was chosen by Iran is the customer who is paying, merchant is paying nothing. So this is why for each merchant you find 10 terminals, maybe 20 terminals, POS terminals in Tehran. You can see it's very, very interesting when merchants have 20 terminals in front of him. So we have to be careful for choosing what the model of the payment scheme, because this will have very, very big effect in the future.
Exactly. So the question, Mr. Mohammed, is that what are the dependencies of this model? So today you are saying that you need to consider the existing ecosystem, the maturity of that market, the scalability, because you may, after 2 to 3 years, this local payment scheme, it will be regional payment scheme. So what are the parameters that should be set by central banks today in order to decide the implementation of local scheme? Is it about the number of processors, the technology, the maturity of the market, the strategy itself?
Well, today the question they have, central banks, what they have exactly is just some small question to be independent for international schemes. So this is the first question.
Why?
Why? Because we are still the payment who have the licenses, they are paying loyalties for Visa, MasterCard, UnionPay, etc. Even those, but they don't see the other part of the things. Those schemes have more than 50 years of existence.
Exactly. So the main reason is about the cost fees from Visa and MasterCard, and this is why the country decides to go for the local payment scheme.
Schemes, yes. But they have to think about other things than cost. They have to think about opening payment scheme. They have to think to integrate very quickly the technology, new technology and innovation, and not push the innovation. As I told you, it's when you do, for example, when you choose a closed payment system, you have to think the services and how quick to integrate technology, new technology and new services.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mohammed. So we will go to Mr. Turan. So the question is that today, based on your experience, so today, in order to move from local payment scheme from a specific country to a regional payment scheme, so what's required and what are the roadmap that should be set for the local schemes to be, you know, adaptable by the international schemes later on after 2 to 5 years?
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. This is Meli. I'm from Magellan. I'm working as a CPO. Formerly, I was responsible for fintech strategy of the presidency in Turkey. So I will gonna mention just a quick about the Turkish local payment scheme. Maybe you have heard. It's called TROY. It's developed under the central bank, under the interbank center. BKM, and it's developed with the technology of discovery. It's not it's a local payment scheme, but the tech is dependent on the discovery. So in Turkey, this has some restrictions. You cannot open this payment scheme to regional markets because of you are dependent on discovery, you know.
Yes, but Discovery is being recognized as an international scheme, so it's a very good step that you managed to hook up with Discovery Network. So may Visa, MasterCard, after that they will come, and Troy as a local scheme, it will be recognized by the international scheme.
Yeah, it's recognized in terms of usage of Turkish customers, but there are some restrictions in terms of you cannot issue some cards in Iraq, in Iran, or in Romania, you know. As Troy, you cannot issue Troy cards because you are dependent on Discovery. So if you want to expand to a regional area, you need to be independent in terms of technology. So in my opinion, if you want to create a regional card scheme that's local but it will expand to regional or global, the tech stack must be independent. So it's also important in terms of political economy as well. For example, maybe you know that after the Russia and Ukraine war, there were some sanctions on Mir scheme. So and Visa and MasterCard banned the cards that they were not available in Russia. So it affected the independency of the country in terms of payment systems. So yeah, if you strategize some local payment scheme, it has to be tech independent, and the political, the economic, and social, the society's fundamentals should be ready to be expanded regionally. Actually.
Okay, so when you have implemented Troy, we understand the strategy. It's very clear, and thank you for answering this question. So in terms of the technical specification for Troy as a local scheme here in Turkey, so what, the implementation, so can you please tell us about the implementation of Troy as a local scheme? So the technical specification, is it like from where you get the certification, the test, and so on? So from technical perspective, when you deploy Troy, what are the standards that Troy's follow as a scheme?
Yeah, in terms of technical, I'm not the specialist of this issue actually, but the project, the local card scheme was a project of BKM. It's an interbank center of central bank. So it was very easy to implement in banking system. Yeah, in Turkey, the payment system operator is the central bank. Central bank is operating all the payment scheme, all the payment system. So the BKM, the interbank center, is related to central bank, and banks are obligated to report and to integrate to the central bank. So the central bank integrated directly BKM to the banks via some, of course there are some intermediary, some payment system companies like Garanti, like Bileşim, and there are 5 companies in Turkey who are intermediaries. These are card issuers and card processing companies that they help to expand Troy in Turkey actually.
Thank you very much. I wish that if someone from MasterCard is here so he can join us, because very interested topic about the international schemes and local schemes. So we have more, know-how from MasterCard. I don't know if anyone can support, but so anyway, we will go to Mr.
Just I want to add something
Yes,
about the
go ahead.
steps. So the steps for payment schemes. So first of all, as I explained, is what are the models for the payment we want to implement for a specific payment scheme. So is it interchange model? Who is going to pay the transaction, etc.? So this is the first thing. Then there is a specification about the technology. Who is the chip technology? Are we going to use, for example, you have discussed about discover specification for chip. And for example, in Serbia, and I think in Croatia, they have choose diners. Others, they have choose Visa, MasterCard in white label. So this is technological specification for the chip. What are the application we are going to implement there? So maybe we are going to use just debit credit application for purchase, for withdrawal. But other countries have choose more. I mean, for example, I remember Slovenia, for example, have choose mass transit application, health application, everything on one chip. Some country even passport and national ID on the same chip. So this is the chip and then technical interoperability for specific technological and how the message format, QR code format, how we are going to be quick for reconciliation, settlement reconciliation. Are we going to use the latest ISO 20022, etc. specification, etc. So those are the technical and steps for implementing payment scheme.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. So since you have raised, the chip topic part of specification that should be followed by any scheme. Today when a local scheme decides to choose a specific profile for that chip, so what are the ways that the scheme should follow? Is it about what is the existence of the chips that are available in the market? Is it about the contact or contactless? Because as per my knowledge that some of the, the chip profiles, it's still not mature in terms of the contactless. So what are the weight in terms of taking decision for a local scheme to decide on the chip type and chip profiles?
Yeah, so this is a very technical question. So, I mean, EMVCO have decided to respond to this question to create two type of application. One is called CPA application and the other is CCD application. So CPA application is one where they have done some union of all the applications that are existing, Visa, MasterCard, Union Pay, Discover, Diners, etc. And the second one is a CCD application where we have the minimum of everything, means that's running of the minimum from all applications that are EMVCO compliant. So this, some companies have created something related on CCD application. So that's the problem is those applications are not going so fast for technology, and if you want to do that also, don't forget that you have to run also a directory yourself, you have to run your token vault yourself, you have to run your signature because you need a signature to sign your chips for personalization yourself. So you have to do everything yourself. I mean, these items are very important because chip technology need a signature. So you need to sign everything by yourself. So you need to step up all of this by yourself. So you can have the help from provider, but as you know, and this is what was done for many countries like Nigeria, for Verve, like Ghana, like others, unfortunately, you will be dependent on only one provider of technology to do everything for signing, for having token vault, for doing everything. So that's the issue. I mean, you have the advantage to be independent of international scheme, but you have to be very aware that you will be dependent technology on only one provider.
So from your experience, what's the recommendation?
The recommendation is the one chosen by some countries. For example, in France is to do both and the customer will choose. I mean, just for information, in DSP2, if you have heard about the DSP2, which is the second service directive of the payment in Europe, you have the local technology, you have the local payment scheme, and you have the other also payment scheme. And just for information, the DSP2 announcing that the final customer, the final merchant who are going to decide, depending on the price, depending on how easy will be the payment, what is the payment scheme to do for the transaction.
So the merchant is deciding the payment scheme for the transaction.
Depending on the interchange and depending on the commission. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Mr. Ibrahim Ghait. So Ibrahim, since you have enough experience in managing Berso centers, and as per Mr. Mohammed is saying that when you consider personalization for the cards, for different schemes that require different technology and different capabilities in terms of personalization. So can you please inform us, what should be done in order for a Berso center to be capable to personalize different schemes, and if you can tell us about the experience that you have done with local schemes in Libya and international schemes.
Okay. Ibrahim Gate, Tadawul Financial Group. The main difference between local schemes and international schemes goes down to the standards. I'm just going to make it, I'm going to try to make it short and simple. After you do your part as processors or issuers in selecting your scheme, setting up the parameters in the applications inside it, what do you want it to do, this is where we come in. So basically, as a personalization center, you would have a platform, a solution to personalized cards. it could be a generic platform, but still, for every single scheme, which we call a product in the personalization center, you have to set up the parameters of which we call a product profile. For example, we have multiple, we personalize multiple products, local scheme-wise, debit and prepaid. And for each product, you would have to have certain parameters, you'd have to have a certain profile that includes what do you want this product to do and the extent of this product, basically. The main difference that you ask right now is between local schemes and international schemes. The local schemes, of course, you would find a room for flexibility, considering that the issuer or the processor, the owner of that scheme, would contract with you on certain obligations for you to fulfill. When it comes to international schemes, like Visa, MasterCards, and all of that, there is this Bible that is called the Report on Compliance that comes from the payment card industry, PCI, of which you need to fulfill. You have a set of requirements. If you look at it, of course, it's going to seem endless, but it's achievable. It's quite difficult. So the difference between them is that you'd have to adhere to this Bible, which goes down to the tooth and nail of every single thing. And the other difference that you notice is that when you personalize international schemes, everything from the processes to your documentation, to your method, to your basically everything that's enabling you to personalize has a life cycle. And that life cycle is tightly scrutinized. And of course, you would have to go through annual audits. You would have to, if you have any findings, you would have to come up with remediations for it. So the room for breathing when it comes to international schemes is not much, it's not there. So there's this Bible you have to adhere with because everybody else in the world adheres to this Bible, which is why, the main reason that Tadawul Financial Group is the first PCI certified personalization center in Libya. It's due to the fact that these requirements are, as I told you, they go down to the tooth and nail, and these documents look endless, but of course not impossible.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. So, Mr. Mohammed, so today, if you can give us how you consider the contact and contactless part of the scheme regulation as an international scheme, and of course as a local scheme since it's still not mature in some markets. So we need to talk a bit about the contact and contactless in terms of local versus international scheme.
Yeah, for information, for international scheme, I mean contactless is mandatory. So it's now from 2018, contactless is mandatory everywhere. Now, for local scheme, it's depend. It's depend because they are being we're depending on the technology. I mean, even now, some technology, I have explained about CCD and CPA, which are defined by EMVCO, are still not easy to implement contactless. And even they are not required to be contactless. Just for information, in my country, Morocco, we have had a very long experience about CPA cards and was completely abandoned because we have seen that there is no interest at all to have CPA cards in the country, where if we have, I mean, when you are discussing about international specification of cards, Visa, MasterCard, UnionPay, etc. We're not discussing about that they are going to, these schemes will manage transaction in the country. For information, those we can have, for example, those schemes could be national schemes. There will be no interchange, no assessment fees because the local transaction will be totally local transaction. I agree, I mean, for the personalization also, when you are personalizing with exactly the very details, but I mean, at least for international schemes, you have all this sequence, you have everything defined. if you choose for the local schemes, everything is not defined, unfortunately. Or you are going to have, as I explained, you will be depending on your provider, one technology provider.
Exactly. This is the question. Mr. Mohammed today, he said that for the local scheme, it's something that easy to implement in terms of the personalization, but yet the approval, it will be managed by like one provider or one entity which is managed by the regulators. So, which makes sure that the personalization business, it will also be as a monopoly for a specific
Yes.
country. So how, you know, from your experience, how we can overcome such an issue?
I mean, it will be difficult if we choose one provider, and this is what happened for example, in many countries in Africa. I mean, just near Libya, there is Algeria who have choose this solution of CCD, and in the market now we will find two different payment schemes. And if we go to the market, just for information, to create in Morocco, for example, just to tell difference between two countries that have choose international network and an international payment scheme, and the country who have choose local payment scheme. I have one card, and I can use it everywhere, and I can digitize it in my mobile, in Android or Apple Pay, and I can do payment in my country or other country. And this is what happened in Turkey, in all the world. Now, in those countries that we have there speaking of, there is always a person have to have two cards, one for local scheme and one for other scheme. For local scheme, we have specific limits, we have specific technology, we have specific even terminals, POS terminals, and we have merchant with other terminals for international transactions, and the cardholder have an international card to do only international transactions, e-commerce transaction. Of course, there is no difficult to implement e-commerce transaction for local scheme, because as I told you, we need local directory and local payment security methods.
Thank you. So the last questions for Turan, as being explained by Mohammed, for some local scheme, there will be some obstacle on the functionality, i.e. the online payment or an e-commerce. So from your experience with Troy, how you overcome this issue, Mr. Tulan?
Thank you again. Actually, there are some problems, as I also experienced. That, for example, I'm trying to use Troy in terms of paying by POS by e-commerce, but some international companies do not accept this. For example, Amazon do not accept this in Turkey, or other some international. These are local, Amazon Turkey, but their tech stack, their payment tech stack is not ready for it. So it's an obstacle, of course. I could not use my own local card scheme in Amazon or etc. and Uber and other international companies. So there is an globalization problem as well in terms of e-commerce. But there's also maybe it's not an obstacle, but it's an alternative. Account-to-account payments, for example, in Turkey, A2A payments are also available. You can use the Turkish QR code standard in order to pay with your account. So it's also it's not an obstacle. I'm not sure if it's an obstacle. It's an alternative to local card schemes. You don't need a card. You can just pay with your mobile banking app directly with your account. It's also maybe it can be also an alternative to local card schemes, a local payment scheme. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have reached the end of this session, so we will give like 1 minute for each one just to conclude and to give, the recommendation based on the experience, and in the same time, if there's any questions from the audience, we can have this question right to the speakers.
Thank you. I think the moderator was being very diplomatic and didn't want to mention that we're talking about Libya and where we're going in Libya. I have two questions. One to Mr. Ahmed, to Mr. Milih. You raised the issue of Russia, okay? And I think this is the concern that our regulators in Libya have. Okay, what if we use Visa, MasterCard as a scheme? We will end up the same way the Russians ended up during the Ukrainian war. However, the cards in Russia did not stop working on the local network. It was the international network that was sanctioned, or the cards did not function. That's one thing. Second, in the event of a sanction by Visa and MasterCard, I think it's not going to be a sanction of Visa and MasterCard alone. I think you're going to be sanctioned by everybody else, the IBMs and the Microsofts of the world. So does it really make sense to be worried about a card being sanctioned on an international network for political reasons when you know that everybody else is going to sanction you? So I would like to hear, because I heard your comment about, the Russian, and we just would like to know, is that really of a main concern? And my question to Mr. Mohammed is, you talked about CPA and CDD and the difference between them, and the fact that countries that have adopted a solution from one company, from an individual company, they practically gave their neck to a company by their own hands. Can you please elaborate more and give us an example, a real live example, rather than saying it happened elsewhere? Because there is a talk of 130 countries around the world, 30 countries around the world that have adopted, a single chip from one single provider. And at least give us one, and what have they done, and where are they today because of such a decision? Thank you.
Too many questions, but very valid ones. So we'll start with
Okay,
Joyce,
just
if you
short
can
answer.
take.
Yeah, actually, thank you for your question. Russia isn't just sanctioned country. We are also sanctioned because of MIR. Maybe you remember, in Turkey, MIR card scheme was available, and Europe and America sanctioned Turkey as well. So unfortunately, Turkish politicians decided not to use MIR in Turkey as well, because cross border. It should be a concern for politically different countries like Turkey as well, like Libya, like Russia, because such countries, especially Muslim countries, sometimes do not, maybe cannot integrate with Western countries or with their political standards, political hegemonia, So if you look from this side, we, in terms of independency, we need to launch or develop some alternatives. Not just card schemes, also card networks as well. Russia has a card scheme, but they have not a network in Europe, in Turkey as well. So these kind of integrations, these kind of networks is also important. It's a concern for Libya, for Turkey, for Iran, and all countries who has a cause with Western economies. Thank you so much. Maybe we can talk.
Yeah, so you can have a separate discussion later on. So the second question is for Mr. Mohammed.
Yeah, the second question was about the countries that have choose CCD and CPA. I mean, more CCD than CPA because CPA was abundant for CCD, more CCD because CPA, as I told you, there was a problem about contactless option. So they are not 100% contactless, and we are in the world where everything now, every card, specification standards are going to more toward contactless. CCD is contactless, but and was chosen by many countries. I'm going to discuss about the countries in Africa, because there are a lot. They have chosen this option. I mean, just the most important ones are Nigeria, Ghana, and Algeria. So Algeria are going to begin they have just begun last year. But if we discuss about Nigeria, Verve, local network who have chose CCD option. What we can find there, and in order to open the network for outside cards, to open then the local network and not to be closed network, we have now a configuration of many network on the same country. So we have Verve country, Verve network payment scheme Verve that is connected to local Visa and to connected to local MasterCard. And then we found out a very specific network where we don't have only one payment scheme. And that's dangerous thing for choosing a specific a closed payment scheme if we want to open the country to outside to other payment schemes, because we have to be interoperability not between banks, not between cards, but between payment schemes. And it's not easy to have this interoperability, especially when you choose a specific technology. So this is what happened in Nigeria. This is what happened also in Ghana. The others, I mean, the majority, as explained, the majority in the world have chosen to use. In France, for example, they have used, the first one who have choose CCD technology as white label technology, and we are going to give the name, which is the pure technology that was chosen also for Libya. Carte bancaire, for example, who have chosen the first switch that have chosen carte bancaire on the beginning. But now if you go there, you will find that carte bancaire is doing local cards for local network, but was also accepting Visa, MasterCard, Union Pay, and it's not closed at all. It's not closed payment scheme.
Can I add one point on
Yes,
that, please?
yes.
The thing is, if you look farther than that, if you go further, sorry, you hooked the personalization service when you choose one technology provider in the loop as well. Because then I'd either have to purchase your Perso solution or I have to integrate your Perso solution. So either ways, now you are my provider for the technology, and instead of going with multiple vendors and multiple technologies, like as you mentioned in CPA, now you are my provider. The second point that I want to emphasize is that my pace, when it comes to the technological race, is going to be at your pace. Because now I'm locked to you. So if you are 3 years behind the market, then I'm 3 years behind the market as well. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you all. So I think we have reached the end of this session. So thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful panel. Lots of insights for our dear distinguished guests. Thank you so much. Thank you.